Three women are gone in China after traveling inside a Xiaomi SU7 electric car, and the car caught on fire after it hit a barrier on the side of the highway, and the doors were locked so they couldn't get out. The car was allegedly in self-driving mode. This scandal might just break Xiaomi's EV venture in China, and while we're also going to talk about is another EV maker, BYD. Currently, many workers in different factories of BYD across China are protesting for better wages. Now, there's a reason why BYD cars can sell cheaper because they're not paying the workers properly. No amount of speed live streaming in China can actually fix this scandal. Now, I also want to take a moment to just thank you guys for offering those kind words. When I said I was sick, I meant to publish this video yesterday, but I actually was just still feeling quite bad. So I just rested for one more day. So much appreciated to all your kind supports and words and suggestions in that post on YouTube. And also make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're interested in in-depth videos on China, like topic like these, but much more, make sure definitely to subscribe because we have those every single week. This is the Xiaomi SU7 electric car. It wants to look like a Porsche Taycan, drive like a Tesla, and sell like a Toyota. But it's failing at all three. Now, this Xiaomi story broke Chinese internet. Obviously, it immediately got suppressed, and it took a while for Xiaomi to even respond to this case. The victim's mother had been posting for a few days, and essentially first saying that the company was neglecting them and ignoring them while this happened to her daughter, but also the two other victims. Eventually, the story was just going so viral that the CEO of Xiaomi, Lei Jun, even personally made an apology post, but people were still finding the apology inadequate just because of the sheer tragedy that had occurred. Because it's one thing to have deflated tires or a bad suspension system, those are terrible to have, but it's worse when your car doors are locking people inside when they need to escape, and then obviously, you know, the whole thing catching on fire and involving self-driving as well. So it's really a bad, I guess you could call it, three top most concerning things for consumers when it comes to an EV. Well, this tragedy had all of it. Xiaomi finally responded 3 days after the incident, and they initially had a statement, but it failed to address the core issues at hand. For example, about why the battery caught on fire, why the door wasn't unlocking, or the status of the emergency braking, as well as the situation with autopilot driving. Just based on the report that was published by the police based on Xiaomi's data, the car crashed at about 97 kilometers an hour or about 60 miles per hour, and it hit the barrier on the side of a highway. And this happened while the system that was self-driving was giving a warning to the driver to take over. They were only given about 2 seconds at that speed, which according to some of the data I was reading, is still much less than what would be given or the needed response time, which is averaging about 2.6 seconds. It might be even a little bit slower considering people who are not as experienced with self-driving, or the fact that on highways, people's reaction times, maybe they were listening to music or chatting with their passengers, etc. So, you know, 2 seconds, maybe we were thinking that is quite extremely short for the amount of time to respond to the situation. Now, as the story develops, the victim's mother was forced to delete her post of the entire situation. Now, this is when the government likely took over because the public opinion has shifted to blame Xiaomi, right? Obviously, Xiaomi is a national champion in the sense that they're pushing this rivalry against Tesla, and then they're pushing this domestic expansion of EVs. So, you know, you can't really hurt their image too much. So they're starting to activate, you know, the government side of control. But the story is really, really bad because many people are waking up to what exactly is the reality of Chinese EVs. For a while, since the launch of the SU7, it was being propagandized as this Tesla killer, as if its rival is the Tesla line of cars, and that, you know, it's cutting edge in all of its technologies. That's what the CEO's presentation made it out like to be. Let's first talk about some basic context in China. No Chinese EV makers currently possess self-driving technology above the L2 or L2 plus level, which essentially the L2 level means that the so-called self-driving system requires the full attention of the driver at all times, ready to take over from things like speed, steering, braking, etc. And then when you get to L3, that's when you can start to have a little bit of that so-called hands-off experience, but still, the driver should still be alerted, right? But at L2, you really just need to actually, it's almost like you're still doing cruise control with a little bit more assistance, that is. Because the propaganda says Chinese EVs are rising above the Western counterparts and that the tech limitation is being surpassed by Xiaomi and other companies, like I said, they're making it, right? They're demonstrating this technology as much better than what it actually is. So that obviously leads to some consumers into believing that the technology is reliable, it's going to be sufficient when they use it on the actual highway, leading to some people to actually trust in those products. But the truth is the car's been in development for 3 years and that they skipped many safety tests, or even in the safety tests that they do, it just really, it's not working. And in China, I mean, you can really cut corners when it even comes to car rating and safety tests and all these things. So the product itself, that's why they call it like China's next best EVs or whatever they can be, because yeah, they can call it whatever they want. And this is another case of a SU7 owner who was in auto driving mode and the car sped up to close to 100 kilometers again before it just randomly brakes down to about 30 kilometers an hour, causing the car behind it to speed up and rear end this car. If they can cut corners in safety ratings and other aspects, I mean, they can also cut corners in the self-driving space too, right? After the incident, an internet user tried to simulate the same driving conditions and road conditions, but with a Tesla. So they went onto the highway, they used the FSD program that Tesla has to try to emulate that same sort of condition, and it turns out they were successful in passing the test and they did not hit the barriers on the side at that same speed. So it's one thing for cars to catch fire. It's another thing to lock people inside while it's on fire. Obviously, this requires some investigations as to how it caught on fire, so we wouldn't know about that. But the thing is, there's likely some electrical issues with the car, and that locking people inside, it's not something that is supposed to happen. But I think it's unlikely that Xiaomi will tell the public anymore because, I mean, the victim's family has already been silenced, so who really can speak out anymore? And then you also have the battery maker Cattle saying that it's not their own fault, that they only assembled the core parts, the rest was assembled by Xiaomi themselves. So there's a lot of shifting the blames going on already. There's a lot of lack of transparency. There's a lack of just essentially who wants to take the responsibility here. Even though the CEO says he will, but what exactly is he going to do? Because none of this addresses the core problem, which is tomorrow they can release something like a new barbecue grill and call that like surpassing the West counterparts in barbecue technology, right? And Chinese people will still eat that up. It's really not about the product itself, right? Because, they can say they invented a spaceship for cows and people in China will be like, yeah, we finally won against the West. It's this mindset that they have that they do not, like they're not going to address or change. So fundamentally, this thing or this type of tragedy, believe it or not, will continue to happen. And some of these, they're simply using customers as like safety test subjects or for the purpose of actually seeing if the cars are working or not, which is really sad. So when you buy a Chinese EV, you're effectively becoming their test subjects. Now, this car has already had so many problems over last year, like they had an anti-pinching function for the trunk. It doesn't really work. This is the SU7 crash on the side of the road again, and they come to cover the car up. I mean, why do you need to cover the car up? You don't want people to see that this is a SU7? You had a woman last year who bought the car after driving about 10 minutes, the suspension system broke, and then she was basically forced to sell the car at a loss because Xiaomi wouldn't fix the car for her for free. And then you also have this one who hit the curb and the tires deflated immediately. You have this one here, which the car started to leak water in all four of its wheels during a test drive. So there's clear inadequacy in reliability, safety, and probably electronic and auto driving. Okay, now let's talk about the other big EV maker in China, BYD. This is a BYD brand all-electric bus. And meanwhile, their car quality is not getting much better. This man posted this video on March 8th, and his BYD randomly exploded in the parking garage, and gladly he wasn't inside at the time.
把这里边我这里边东西都烧了，1年半的车自动燃烧，就从这个地方中控台底下开始燃烧，今天给我烧成全部就这样了。
And this man owned his BYD for more than 2 years, and he says it's already rusting. And these are all from March this year, by the way.
大家看一下啊，现在已经开始自动泊车了。哎，你是找的哪个车位？停！那你往后倒一下吧。
我刚刚钥匙是反的，看不见，我越慌越拿不住。
往后倒一下。晚上这个
他找的就是这个车位呀，第2个车位。
看见没？翻车了吧？
And nice parking. People love to talk about how BYD is selling like hotcakes. It's cheaper than Tesla, that people love BYD over Tesla. Well, the thing is, you know why it's cheaper? It's because the workers are making way less money than Tesla factory workers. For many days, these factories, the workers are protesting for an increase to their wage. The reason is now BYD is trying to push all these, expansions into Europe and other countries, so they want to follow labor laws and work regulations. To do that, they're mandating the 5 days a week, only 8 hours per day work hours, right? 40 hours a week. Sounds really good on paper, except they're not increasing the hourly wage of workers. So these workers who are traditionally working 12 hours a day, overtimes on the weekends, that they're getting like 4,000 to 5,000 yuan, or about 800 to 900 US dollars a month doing these overtimes. Now they got their salary cut in half because they're no longer allowed to work overtimes, yet they're not getting an hourly wage increase. So it's like you literally just took people's overall salary and cut it in half, and then told them, yeah, we're going to follow labor laws. Sure, it's nice to follow labor laws, but not if the dilemma is following labor laws versus getting, your salary cut in half, right? Because then nobody would want to follow labor laws, because the basis of that is you give people a livable wage. Yeah, I can't believe that's the dilemma that Chinese workers have to deal with. Anyways, that's the state of Chinese EVs. Yeah, they're not the golden age of evolution when it comes to cars. All right, thanks so much for watching this episode of China Insider on the Chinese EVs. If you enjoy the content, leave a like, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, bye-bye.